I don't even know if there's a better way to say it. I'm not sure. Hello, welcome to my booktube channel, The Loc'D Booktician, and today we're going to get into a lot. This may be by far my longest video. I don't think it might be more than 30 minutes, but at least 25.
Let's pay attention to the melanin. It's popping. I don't usually do my makeup, but she's just cute. Like, here we are. I just, not oftentimes do my hair want to cooperate, just be pulling my little edges off, but she's into it.
There is nothing feminist about having so many resources at your fingertips and choosing to be ignorant. There is empowering or enlightening in deciding that intent trumps impact, especially when the consequences aren't going to be experienced by you, but will instead be experienced by someone from a marginalized group. Mikki, Kendall, Hood Feminism. I thought it would be very important to talk to you about How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram X, Kendi, and also Hood Feminism by Mikki, Kendall. I want to describe to you first the process of this video. So this video is going to constantly be referring to both books. What I did to prepare for this video is I've already read the books, and then I read them a second time, and then I highlighted and took notes and all type of different things. I will show you guys a little clip on how I was highlighting and what my method was. I think that this method should be used as often as it can, and this really is just make sure you're color coding and you have codes for those color codes. And I mean, when I say color code, I'm talking specifically to when you're highlighting, what does yellow mean, what do blue mean, and you don't have to share that with the world, but making sure you're consistent with those colors in both books or whatever literature that you're going to use. First, I went through How to Be Anti-Racist, and I highlighted key parts that I remembered was mentioned as well in Hood Feminism. Then I went into Hood Feminism and found the words or the ideas or paragraph from How to Be Anti-Racist and compared it to Hood Feminism. I'm going to give you a quick review on both books. So for How to Be Anti-Racist, it is sort of a memoir, but it's a memoir about Ibram's life and how they have been on this journey of how to be an anti-racist. He talks about color, power, dual consciousness, culture, black, white, ethnicity, race, and it goes on. In each chapter, the beginning of the chapter, he talks about his life or something pertaining to his life, usually in each chapter. And then throughout the chapter, he switches to literature and research and facts to back up how his experiences have informed the research. A lot of people like to use research to inform the experiences. So for Hood Feminism is a book written by Mikki Kendall, and throughout the book, she details about the movement, feminism, and all the women that it forgot about, or all the people that it forgot about. In Hood Feminism, Mikki Kendall writes, instead of framework that focuses on helping women get basic needs met, all too often the focus is not on survival, but on increasing privilege. For a movement that is meant to represent all women, it often centers on those who already have most of their needs met. When I read that, I thought about policies and the inherent further perpetuation of white supremacy within policies in the world, but specifically in the United States, which led me to compare what I just read of what Mikki Kendall said to How to Be Anti-Racist. Kendi writes, the history of racist ideas is the history of powerful policymakers erecting racist policies out of self-interest, then producing racist ideas to defend and rationalize the inequitable effects of their policies, while everyday people consume those racist ideas, which in turn sparks ignorance and hate. That is one way in which I think the book play on each other. Because the purpose of me doing this video is because right away when I read How to Be Anti-Racist, I just kept thinking, wow, this book pairs really well with hood feminism, and how can I do a video to show you guys how well it pairs? Even the stuff that I'm going to talk about in this video is not everything of how they are similar or how they play on each other. They're definitely not similar. They're definitely two different people. But the next part of how I think both of the books play on each other. Kendall writes, white feminism tends to forget that a movement that claims to be for all women has to engage with the obstacles women who are not white face. And how I think that plays along to How to Be Anti-Racist, Kendi writes, feminist efforts to politicize experiences of women and anti-racist efforts to facilitate experiences of people of color have frequently proceeded as though the issues and experiences that each detail occur on mutual exclusive terrains. This is something that was theorized by Kimberle Crenshaw. Although racism and sexism readily intersects in the lives of real people, they seldom do in feminist and anti-racist practices. This goes along with the idea of like solidarity. Solidarity is not for all people. It's not created equal, and we really need to unpack and look in the many ways in our own lives how we claim that we are acting in faith or acting for solidarity. And we need to ask ourselves, who is missing from those rooms? Whose voice did we forget? Literally a movement that, forgot about a lot of women. That's exactly what Mikki Kendall is talking about. The next thing that I think plays really well, Kendall writes, trans women are often derided or erased, while prominent feminist voices parrot the words of conservative bigots, framing womanhood as biological and determined at birth instead of as a fluid and often arbitrary social construct. It made me think of how we being queer anti-racist. Kendi writes, queer anti-racism is equating all the race sexualities, striving to eliminate the inequities between the race sexualities. We cannot be anti-racist if we are homophobic or transphobic. To be queer anti-racist is to understand the privileges of my cisgender, of my masculinity, of my heterosexuality, of their intersections. He further states, to be queer anti-racist is to serve as an ally to transgender people, to intersex people, to women, to the non-gender conforming, to homosexuals, to their intersections, meaning listening, learning, and being led by their equalizing ideas, by their equalizing policy campaigns, by their power struggle for equal opportunity. I think that's important. The part was listen and learning. I think a lot of times when we think about J.K. Rowling, I think a lot of people are really attached to Harry Potter. And if that book, prior to you knowing or not knowing about, J.K. Rowling, I can understand how you would think this is like some great shit, right? It's awesome. I'm loving this little white man with the glasses. He killing it. Maybe he's not killing it. A lot of times, he's just running around here with narcissistic tendencies and this huge martyr complex. Like, I get it. However, people attachment to the book and also the attachment to J.K. Rowling and making the choice to still support J.K. Rowling, to still support Harry Potter, I don't quite understand. As it states, to be queer anti-racist is to serve as an ally to transgender people, to intersex people, to women, to the non-gender conforming, to homosexuals, to their intersections. I wonder, how can you be an ally if you still support J.K. Rowling? I don't understand. Like, I can understand some things, but some things I don't get. And I know not every person who identifies as trans or gender non-conforming feels this way. Like, some people are like, what? It's a book, you know, or, oh, it's her. Like, oh, I'm not shocked or whatever. But I feel like if one person from a community tell you that is problematic, that should be enough. Because if a person who belongs to group X is telling you that this person, J.K. Rowling, is literally furthering the toxic narrative and the erasure of trans women, I don't see how that's a difficult choice on choosing whether to peace out. Peace out, like, period. I'll leave you with this. Kendi states, to be queer anti-racist is to see homophobia, racism, and queer racism, not the queer person, not the queer space, as the problem, as abnormal, as unnatural. And the choir said amen. In the book Hood Feminism, Kendall writes, when feminist rhetoric is rooted in biases like racism, ableism, trans misogyny, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia, it automatically works against marginalized women and against any concept of solidarity. Now, I've already talked about solidarity. When I read this, I just kept thinking, like, where else did I see something that goes along the lines of what I just read? And I knew that in How to Be Anti-Racist, it does talk about that. But I read a line that is stuck in my head and I could not think about it. So I sat there and I thought about it, and it was from Me, You, and White Supremacy. Layla writes, solidarity is for white women. I have never felt a phrase so hard in my life. Even in Hood Feminism, there's a chapter that says solidarity is still for white women. So there you have it, folks. Kendall writes, women in communities of color must balance fighting external problematic voices with educating those inside of our communities who are bad actors, and we accept feminism to do the same work as itself. So when it's talking about works, it made me think about, man, black women are definitely magical. Women of color are definitely magical. I know that in this book, sorry, I took the sleeve off. I was like, this thing is annoying. So in How to Be Anti-Racist, Kendi talks often about the black woman in his life that has really woke him up. And in a lot of ways, he's like, I don't even know why they took care of my ass. Or like, I don't even know why they gave me the time of day. Or like, he is so thankful for these black women, these black queer women who took time when they didn't have to educate him and to metaphorically wake him up. It's also hard work. It is hard work. And I'm talking as a black woman when I either have to educate my white friends or I have to educate people within my community. It is a special kind of hard work when I have to educate other black men, specifically black cisgender heterosexual men. It's a difficult thing. There's a lot of things wrapped up in that I don't have to get to in this video, but it is hard work for you to have to go through all of that and then have to educate white feminists. And it's like, mainstream feminism really need to get it together, because your girl's exhausted. We out here exhausted. Women of color, black women, BIPOC, we are tired. So y'all need to get it together. I know that I've been reading and talking about the comparisons or how both books feed off each other. It's also important for me to give a huge round of applause to both authors for addressing intersectionality and also crediting Kimberle Crenshaw on the work that she has done in coining the term and dishing out so much resource. She's literally putting her body on the line to make sure people are being inclusive and thinking about equity and thinking about access. So the following are just a couple quotes from each book that specifically addresses intersectionality. So in Hood Feminism, intersectionality isn't a convenient buzzword that can be co-opted into erasing Professor Kimberle Williams Crenshaw, who coined the term to be describe the way race and gender impacts black women in the justice system. An intersectional approach to feminism requires understanding that too often mainstream feminism ignores that black women and other women of color are the proverbial canaries in the coal mine of hate. Kendi writes in How to Be Anti-Racist, contemporary feminist and anti-racist discourses have failed to consider intersectional identities such as women of color, Kimberle Crenshaw wrote in 1991. Intersectional theory now gives all of humanity the ability to understand the intersectional oppression of their identities, from poor Latinx to black men to white women to native lesbians to transgender Asians. Intersectional black identities are subjected to what Crenshaw describes as the intersection of racism and other forms of bigotry, such as ethnocentrism, colorism, sexism, homophobia, and transphobia. I just want to point out that it is very hard for me to read from books, especially out loud, because I don't know if it's dyslexia or nervous, but I get very nervous when I'm reading out loud. So if you see me making some mistakes, mind your business. That's all I'm going to say. Just mind your business. I'm going to read to you a quote from Hood Feminism that is repeated throughout the book of How to Be Anti-Racist. And I really want you to go and find out what I'm talking about. Counter to that centering of hypermasculinity is black feminism, which recognizes that fighting the white supremacist patriarchy outside the community is different than fighting the toxic masculinity inside the community. I think a lot of times in mainstream feminism, we forget about the language we use, and we also forget about the narratives that we have and how we perpetuate them. Kendi writes, despite white feminist narratives to the contrary, there is no absence of feminism in Islam, the Black church, and other communities. I think it's really important to think about those things. And also in Kendi books, Kendi talks about microaggressions, right? And I think a lot of things that has been said or will continue to say, unless we be more introspective about feminism being in Islam and Black churches and other communities, we have to think about the microaggressions that we say to those people in regards to feminism. And Kendi talks about, I'm not using microaggressions anymore. It's aggressive, period. We tone police things that shouldn't be tone police. It's aggression, period. I don't know what's micro about putting somebody in their body without their permission. Like, for example, me misgendering them is not a microaggression. That's aggressive, period. In Hood Feminism, Mikki talks about her journey of being told, I'm pretty for And we all know what is. Can be you're pretty for a fat girl, you're pretty for a black girl, you're pretty for an Asian girl. But right now in this text and in the identity that I hold, I'm going to talk about being pretty for a black girl. So Mikki talks about like it's a backhanded compliment and it's trash and like what that does to a person and its regards and related to feminism. And here he writes, she's cute for a dark girl was the best some of them could muster for dark-skinned women. Even dark gay men heard it. I don't normally date dark-skinned men, but I'm just not sure why you would think that's okay. I don't know. There's a lot to unpack there. I have lots of thoughts. I have lots of thoughts. I'm not even sure I should be putting them on YouTube, so I'm going to keep some of them, most of them to myself. But I want y'all opinion on that phrase. Like, what do you get told? What do you get told you're pretty for? Another part that plays on each other, or like a statement and then how to be anti-racist towards that statement. So Mikki writes, colorism is a cultural institution that has skewed access to opportunity by consistently placing those with lighter skin in positions of privilege. Kendi writes, color anti-racism, a powerful collection of anti-racist policies that lead to equity between light people and dark people, supported by anti-racist ideas about light and dark people. There are quite a few times in How to Be Anti-Racist where the author discusses Native people, Native and Indigenous people, Latinx communities, and Asian cultures, which is similar to hood feminism, but different. So they talk about it, but in different sections. I think that it's most important for me to read to you what hood feminism Mikki Kendall wrote. A study by the Urban Indian Health Institution showed that of the 5,712 cases of missing Indigenous women reported in 2016, only 116 were logged in the Department of Justice database, which proves mainstream feminism don't really care about brown people who are missing, specifically Indigenous women who are missing. There are documentaries about, I think her name is something Bennett, and she was a little girl who was in pageantry, and soon as she became missing, it was worldwide news. Everybody was looking for this little girl. Versus Alexis Patterson, who has been missing since I think I was 11 or 12. No one has found her. No one looked for her in the manner that they looked for the Bennett child. All children should be looked for. All of them. Like, if a kid is missing, that's not okay. If a woman is missing, if a person is missing and their family is looking for them, that should be treated equally. But unfortunately, that is not the state in which we live in. And it's heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking that people still have not found Alexis Patterson. When I was a little girl, I lived in Milwaukee and I saw her face everywhere. Like, her face was everywhere. And I'm like, what if that was me? Like, the fact that we're not finding and looking for all of these women and that we only look for little white girls, I don't even know where to start. Shit. Mikki Kendall continues to write, a 2014 study in the American Journal of Public Health on causes of death in Indigenous American communities using data collected between 1999 and 2009 found that Indigenous women have a homicide rate triple that of white women. And a lot of times in this book, Hood Feminism, she talks about domestic violence. She talks about how it plagues certain other communities than it does other communities. specifically women in those communities. And it talks about how mainstream feminism don't consider domestic violence, don't consider these women. I'll leave you with this last statement from Hood Feminism. True feminist solidarity across racial lines means being willing to protect each other, speaking up when the missing women are not from your community, and calling out the ways that predatory violence can span multiple communities. When we are thinking about the notion of being an anti-racist, the notion of being a feminist, if we are not thinking of it intersectional, we're wasting our time, we are fraud, and we are liar, and we are racist, and we are not inclusive. We're not thinking about equity. We're selfish. We don't care about who have access to what. That's literally what you're telling yourself. You can at me on this, you can fight me on this, but I'm a firm believer of that. If we are not educating ourselves, if we are not looking at it intersectional, in an intersectional manner, we're literally wasting our time, because mainstream feminism is not doing it, right? Just calling a person racist and doing all the, the call out culture, which definitely has its pros, and feeling like you need to wear your woke badge is not enough. You need to be continually working on this throughout your life. And that is what Me, You, and White Supremacy, that book states. This needs to be lifelong. You don't get no badges for being a good person. Like, you need to wake up. Like, it's not okay for us to keep ignoring the disenfranchised, keep ignoring marginalized groups. It's not okay. Every community, no matter what you're in, you can be in beauty on Booktube, talking about NASCAR on Booktube, talking about books on Booktube. You could be selling weave. You can be the #1 candy supplier. Everywhere, every sector needs to be having these conversations. You are not exempt from this conversation because it's not a part of your brand. You are not. That video was rough. It was rough for me. I don't know about you, but I feel drained. Thank you so much for listening to this video. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment. I really want to know what you thought. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time.